like to begin with Jonas Makers, who both Shirin and I admire immensely for what he had done for the American avant-garde cinema, from having created the amazing magazine Film Culture, created Filmmakers Cooperative, and then Filmmaker Cinematheque, which eventually turned into Anthology Film Archives, an institution that I associate with as a very proud board member. We three of us seem to have one thing in common. We share this profound sense of dislocation. Jonas, I think, came to New York in 1949 after a few years spent at displaced persons camp or forced labor camp in Germany. Shirin left Iran in 1975 directly to come, I think, just 2 years before the Iranian Revolution, to go to school at UK Berkeley as an undergraduate and graduate student, major in painting. But by the time she came to New York in 1983, she gave up painting and co-founded the now famous architectural storefront with her former partner, Kieran Park, which I interviewed, which reminded me I need to make the transcription and add in publish in the rail. Remarkable man. And I believe that years, 10 years or 11 years, gave you the foundations of your intellectual and artistic life. And what's so interesting about the three of us, as I'm thinking now, is that we tend to share our common interests, but we mediate our anxiety through different things that we do so differently. I remember Jonas often get asked because how he mediate, how he conciliate this complex history. He always say, I was born and raised in Lithuania. I live in New York, but my country is culture. So culture is Shirin's country, and it's mine as well. Where do we begin? I think the way that we should begin is that the notion of dream, which somehow becoming more and more pronounced in Shirin's work. I don't dream. If I do, I don't remember them whatsoever. So everything I do is very structured through the routine, rigorous routine of what I need to do with daily editorial work, selecting feature interviews, certainly with feature articles, and among other things with production team and editorial team. It's very intense. But that's my practical life. With Shirin, she dreams all the time. She dreams when she's awake, she dreams at night, she dreams in her work. But before we go to that, we address that, Shirin. We had a chance not long ago, a few months ago, when we talked about your remarkable film, the second feature, Looking for Unketum. I don't know if you've seen it at all, but if you haven't, I would encourage you to see it. It's a remarkable film. It's an artist film. It's a film of an artist about another artist, and a film within the film. It's one of those films that you should just see it one night or one weekend and would perpetually evoke more complexity and subtleties. And it's one of those films will be the classic film for artists to watch. But we talk a lot about that. We talk about how a certain consequence from the very beginning, Shirin, when you began, for example, through the medium of photography, Woman, that whole series, the Unveiling series, that was early 90s to the late 90s, and then eventually undertaking more of video works. I mean, I'm sure you all have seen the remarkable trilogy, Turbulent Passage and Favor, that was made in 3 successive years, 99, 98, 99, 2000. Yeah. Is that correct date? Yeah. And there's many others. But I think leading to the first feature film, Woman Without Man, which won her the Silver Lion at the Venice Film Festival in 2009, was the first time that I have confronted the certain extremity, or not so much extreme, way of, I guess, deploy a certain issue of magic realism. And magic realism is usually associated with Latin American literature. We think of Borges, Marquez, Neruda, and a few others, because political issue can be expressed, whereas in a established literary form would be almost impossible. So before we talk about dreams, the issue of dreams, Shirin, can we begin with magic realism? I mean, when in fact did you come upon that form, and how did you manage to allow it to enter your work?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming on this rainy evening in the holidays to hear us. And I want to say I really love the printed matter, and the fact that we're here, it makes me feel like storefront time, and I'm just so happy with my association with Brooklyn Rail, and it's just a great evening, intimate. And so actually I wanted to say that for me, I started as a photographer, and for me, the women of Allah were very conceptual. They touched upon reality, realism, political reality, the revolution, martyrdom. But in reality, they subverted the reality, and it became something else. It became a fiction. And much of the work was involved with poetry. So for me, it was always this conjunction between realism and fiction and poetry. When I moved to cinema with Woman Without Men, which was in collaboration with Roja, who was here, and it was a novel that was written by Shahrnush Parsipur, and it was a magic realist novel. And my draw to that book and readaptation of it was because it had a footing in realism and one pure magic, meaning an orchard that was out of, unworldly, and then the city of Tehran in Iran when it was going through the coup d'etat of 1953. So it was extreme opposites. And then now that I look back, after that, I made Dreamers, this trilogy. It's all based on dreams. And then I made Looking for Kulthum, again with Shoja Azari. And there are many, many scenes of dreams in that. In Woman Without Men, not only the story was magic realism, but also I added scenes of dreams. Now I am making my third feature film called The Land of Dreams. and it really, again, goes back to this surrealism. And it's about America. It has a footing in what takes place in this country today, but then another footing in completely surrealistic narrative. And I look back and I say, what's going on? What is this obsession? And I realized, first of all, that there is a similarity between poetry and dreams in the way that it takes all the references as we know, people we know, places we have been, things that we're afraid of, things that we hope for. In poetry, you're completely naked. And in dreams you're completely naked. It's actually is the only time that we're completely truthful. And I remember Shahrnush Parsipur always explained magic realism that, well, we sleep so many hours sleeping, and there's that universe with us, and then we spend so many hours awake, so there has to be two different worlds that we are entering. And to add to that, I realized that my work has another form of dichotomy, which is extremely personal, but is also very political. So it's always dealing with this extreme internal issues that are, very existential, anxiety, fear, all kinds of things that are just me, and then the world that I respond to. So with magic realism, with surrealism, with dreams, I feel a certain amount of comfort in the way, and poetry, in the way that we're talking about reality, but we really are not at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's a universality in that kind of narrative, because nothing quite makes sense.
Yeah.
The logic of dreams and magic realism, it's not grounded in reality, but there are many references. So the dreamers in this trilogy, actually one of them was based on one of my own dreams. So anyway, that's the general statement I would like to say, that I myself as an artist now can see how certain ideas have been repeated and transformed in different ways. Again, surrealism, magic realism, poetry, and dreams.
Would it be fair to say that the early, more restrained, formal, one even say confrontational in political content, in the Woman of Allah particularly, would that repertoire imagery, Shirin, it's very formal, pictorially formal, frontal. It's very incredibly carefully composed, how the face is seen certain way, the hand, the feet, the weapons, guns in a certain degree of angle and whatnot. These are very carefully staged photography. And I know that it's occasionally would reference in a certain passage of your video where the issue of weight and lightness and volume versus mass or whatever, I mean, it's very, very visible. So my question is that from photography, then video works for a good decade or more, and then eventually to the film. Can you share with us what that process would be?
Woman of Allah was very specifically about a particular moment in Iranian history. And I was trying to fictionalize history. And, I was taking, very vivid images of militant women and inscribing poetry all over. And I was attacked right and left by people who say, you just cannot do that because you're fictionalizing history, but also your position is not very clear in terms of, are you supporting the revolution? Are you supporting fanaticism? Are you criticizing it? And I think that what bothered me, because I think dreams are very innocent. And I think my approach to these photographs, this photographic series, Woman of Allah, was to be innocent, not to have a particular point of view, but just to be an observer and share my observation. But that was not really accepted because it was so vividly political and so grounded in something that people couldn't distance themselves and their own perspective, especially Iranians. So I was heavily attacked, particularly by a lot of Iranian people. And I think subconsciously...
Some are here. Be careful.
But I think subconsciously the move to video and moving to a medium that allowed a more allegorical and kind of ephemeral artistic communication, and that the language, although it was referencing to Iranian culture, Islamic culture, even political issues, it had certain freedom in terms of the metaphoric and allegorical way that it escaped all of those specificities that people brought me down with. And I think, again, I say, Jean-Claude Carrier, who's working with us on this new script, he says, dreams are very innocent. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. We can't commit sins in our dreams. And I think that's really beautiful. And that, I mean, this film is about a woman who goes house to house collecting people's dreams as a census worker. And she's actually a spy for the American government, and not a spy, actually, she works for them. So it's an absurdity, it's a political satire about this obsession of a administration with retrieving people's dreams and interpreting them and trying to see what it means. So anyway, it's I think this film will culminate everything that I've tried to do in my video work and in my cinematic work all into one place.
She just came back with Roja. They drove for 2 weeks, was it? 2 weeks? 4 locations, sickening locations. So I think the film is scheduled to
we hope
production sometime next year.
In May.
In May.
We hope.
Yeah. So I remember, I mean, we all aware, June 98, that culminate to the awareness of this quote-unquote multiculturalism. You remember? And it was so interesting because Shirin, Woman of Allah, is 93, Shirin?
It started 93, yes.
93. And you just expressed through the words of Kadir that dream is innocent. I wasn't long ago, I was at a dinner with Ugo Ronglinone, and the subject came up about Ai Weiwei. And he said, I read your interview with Weiwei twice. It was very good, but I decided that he has no original ideas of his own. In other words, he's not innocent. It's interesting, but I'm very jealous of his ability to mobilize art in a widespread globally. And so it's interesting in a sense, Shirin, because when I thought of the tenement square, the tank man, that average, everyday, maybe young college student with 2 shopping bags, you remember, trying to stop the advancing tanks of People Liberation Army in the most important day. So that essentially gave I would say, permission for Weiwei to come back, especially in 93, 94, I don't remember the exact date, but his father was dying. And he then essentially became the tank man. So it's a very political motivated, but not as innocent as the way you describe. So my question is this, Shirin. Through the political impulse, which result in that political works, the content, and then gradually the overt political motivation, whether conscious or not conscious, eventually became more poetic, eventually became more narrative driven, even though it's not linear narrative. But I would say that it began more so that which essentially led to the Woman of Allah. So what does that mean when you mediate both magic realism and dream? What's the difference there? And whether formal concern, which I'm sure Roja, the one who edited most of the footage, could have more to say about it. But the idea is that how do you balance that? In other words, how do you stay truthful to the script? Do you rewrite the script and then allow certain spontaneity, moment of spontaneousness or accident to occur?
I hope I answer your question correctly. First of all, I'm unable to make any work that is not somehow political, or somehow doesn't touch on some disturbing subject that it concerns us all. I cannot just make a work that's very personal or very culturally oriented without making some kind of to have a sharp knife.
Yeah.
And I think, for example, even this new film, it started with the subject of an Iranian woman in America, in exile possibly, but it's through her perspective and her experience in this country that we get to examine American culture, the issue of poverty, the issue of neglect, hypocrisy, injustice, all kinds of issues. But it is for sure a very distinct perspective from an Iranian perspective, Iranian woman. And then at the same time, in the film, we're writing a segment that it's about her and it's about an Iranian colony that is really a fabric of her own imagination, but it is her nightmare and the world that she comes from. So it was all about, and I hope I'm answering your question correctly, because it is a surrealist story. But the challenge that we had with Jean-Claude Carrier, with Roja, is how to tell the story that is not just an overt criticism of America, but it's a question of humanity, and it's a question of authoritarian governments and fanaticisms of different regimes, both in the perspective of American culture and the Iranian culture. And what haunts her is her Iranian past. And what she's witnessing is the suffering of American people.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, they're not that different. And so overall, we are making a film that is very visual, very emotional, extremely emotional, but we really, really want to make a political statement, not in the kind of didactic way, but we feel there is certain subject that I have now, how many years I've been here, over 30 years, that for the very first time I feel that it needs to be expressed at least, but that's a very one unique perspective. So, but I would never do that in pure realism. I am not capable of not making a film that, you know, that I could not make a completely, and I admire people like Steve McQueen, the filmmaker.
Yeah.
He's a visual artist and he makes completely not abstract, but you know his work, and we are in Chelsea.
Hunger is a good example.
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking about his video work.
Yeah.
But in his feature films, he's extremely conventional, actually.
Yeah.
It's quite realistic.
Absolutely.
And so it's not that I'm just negotiating being an artist and a filmmaker, but negotiating how close I want to get to realism in terms of what I want to say. And I think, so what I want to finally say is that there are two challenges in my part. One is the medium. You know, when you make a film, you have an audience that needs to be entertained and understand.
Yeah.
So you cannot be, you know, too abstract. But also this question of the narrative, how much it serves the realism and how much it touches people in a truly a guttural way, you know.
Yeah.
And this, crossing these boundaries and balancing all of this, it's not easy.
Right.
Because you could either go overboard with the realism or go overboard with the esoteric, the dreamy stuff. And I think that's why it takes so much to write a proper script, because you know, I'm good at short videos, but
Carrier, it's just to remind you, is the legendary scriptwriter collaborator Buñuel made his great film, The Discreet Charm of Bourgeoisie and Variana and, you know, Repulsion and whatnot. But as you say earlier, Shirin, Woman Without Man. Okay, so it's against the historical moment, 1953, the coup d'etat staged by CIA that prompted the return of the Shah. But at the same time, it's a story of 4 women. 2 were portrayed in fairly realistic terms, and the other 2 was completely magical. My point is, from that to looking for Kulthum is no longer a subject of Iranian culture and historical reference whatsoever. It's about a legendary singer from all entire Middle East. I mean, I even listened to her music growing up in Vietnam. She was that famous, just as Edith Piaf in France. What motivated you to start making that film? I mean, that's a huge leap, huge difference.
Actually, I think looking for Kulthum is my most personal work I've ever made, because it's about an Iranian woman living in exile, trying to make a film about an iconic Egyptian artist, and really questioning what it takes to be great, what it that desire, that passion to be an artist, and yet dealing with the nuts and bolts of the life, and it's a very complex story, but ultimately facing her own demons and challenges as an artist while making a film about a hero. And so, as most people know, my protagonists have always been women, and even in Women Without Men, I took the protagonist from Shahnoush Parsipur, but I think we shaped those women according to the way that I identified with every one of them. Every one of those women had something in them that I identified with, and I struggled with their dilemma. You know? And then these videos, those protagonists, each video has one woman. I essentially feel like they were really related a lot to me. And finally, this Land of Dreams, it's also about an Iranian woman experience in America. Of course, I'm not the actress, and it's not entirely autobiographical. But to answer your question, I think I take everything that I experience in life, and the issues and the pains and the journey that I've had as a person, and I try to put them in the characters of my work, whether they're photographs or they're film-based. And again, I think with Looking for Umm Kulthum, I couldn't have been more transparent with my own issues about being a woman artist, and the question of failure and the fear of failure and etc. So it was a hard film to make, actually, for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a hard film for most viewing experience, first viewing experience. I think it's a kind of film that require second, perhaps even third or multiple times. It's like the way that we go back from time to time. I do it almost every year religiously to watch Andrei Rublev by Tarkovsky, just to remind myself, what it's like to be an artist, and the question of fate and everything else in between. So, Shirin, let's focus on these 3 books here, and then we'll open up to everyone in the audience. First, let's just, how Illusion and Mirrors began, and how did you manage to get Natalie Portman to play the part in it?
Well, let me just tell you that the trilogy had a few rules from the beginning.
Yes.
That there would be a single protagonist, a woman, and they will always be dressed in black. It was about their journey, whatever psychological, political it was. And that they were always in natural landscape, one by this ocean, one in the forest, and one in the desert and in the urban landscape. And we also borrowed from surrealist filmmakers, from Mayo Deren to our wonderful photographer who also made films. Help me.
What period, Shirin? 60, 40, 50?
40s, I think he... oh my God. Anyways, a lot of, like, even Jean Cocteau, the filmmaker, and the idea of using glass over the camera, and the way that it blurs the images, and working with illusion and reality, but using the glass in front of the mirror as a device, navigating the audience in terms of where we are.
Yeah.
And Illusions and Mirrors was a collaboration. I was invited to work with Natalie Portman. I didn't seek her out, although I really loved her, but it was a proposal by Dior, and she and I met, and I decided that it had to be, for sure, a project that did not have a political, association, because she was obviously not Iranian, and so it's really essentially it's about a human beings' alter egos and fear of mortality and idea of reaching the very depth of your angst and coming back out.
Yeah.
So it was first in the exterior by the ocean, then following this figure. I forgot another thing. to say what they all had in common, there was always a mother figure in every one of them.
Yes, I noticed that.
And I think that's also coming from my own dreams. The most important dreams I ever have, my mother is in it, as if she's the last connect to Iran, and or some person who's always watching over me.
Well, she comes here every year, no?
No, she hasn't. No, she hasn't gotten a visa for long. Anyway, so every video has a mother figure in it.
Yeah.
And so with this, every video took 2 days. It was a very simple, we had very key conceptual idea that we would use the glass sometimes and we would take it away. So everyone. So with Natalie, it was something extremely existential. With Sarah, to me, it was, for some of you who haven't seen the video, it smells like genocide. It's about a woman, and I was actually inspired by Kurosawa's beautiful films from Dreams, the series that he did. But it's about this woman that finds herself in the woods and not sure if she's alive or dead, and basically death is everywhere, and so it's basically finding the traces of genocide and trying to figure out whether she herself is dead or alive, in a very dreamy way. And with Roja, it's my own dream that I wrote a long time ago, that we actually shot. And by the way, I think Qasem Ibrahimian, who shot these videos, should be here. An amazing Qasem. He's a hero of a cinematographer who also shot Turbulent, Rapture, Fervor, Passage, all this amazing. So we very carefully devised Roja, where the woman, the Iranian female character, found herself in America in an astonishing architecture of a theater that we shot in Albany, surrounded by Americans who were both welcoming and very warm, but also very threatening and not welcoming. And then when she left that surrounding, she found herself in the middle of the desert. And oddly enough, she saw the figure of her mother coming her way just when she was terrified. But as the mother approached her closer and closer, she looked like a monster. She was a monstrous figure. And it was beautifully shot by Qasem, I have to say. It's one of the, and I think Ivorypress did a fantastic job. I have to say, I didn't thank enough to Ivorypress for doing this work, that they used silver. They really, really did a beautiful job. And basically, when she reaches her mother, she presses her body and she flies. And in that flight, she actually, above America and Iran is, and for me, that the question of the mother figure, the motherland, homeland, and all of this was somehow in my dream, but then we tried to bring it visually to whatever it is.
Would Man Ray be the artist you're thinking of?
Oh my God, thank you.
So he collaborated
I don't know if you
Cocteau.
have seen his videos are so painterly, and I studied a lot of his work, and he used glass, and it's like so this series borrowed a lot from Maya Deren to Kurosawa to Man Ray to Jean Cocteau to all the surrealist filmmakers. And again, I'm really grateful to Ivorypress to put this together.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book, and so I would urge that you would get one on your way out, get Shirin sign it. But let's just, shall we just ask whether everyone have 1 or 2 questions? Yes.
Question is the transition between reality and dream, or reality and memory, which is something that which was one of the, I think, interesting and difficult parts of your last film, and it's something that is a recurring theme, and I wonder if you have, what your current ideas are about enacting the transition.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that, because I think dreams are a kind of a transformation of our memories, or things that we don't actually confront on daily basis because we rather not. And I think if you share this with me, that a lot of times things that we run away from visit us in our dreams, things that we're really afraid of. You told me that you dreamed, last night you told me that you were eaten by a lion. And we said, you're becoming very successful, it must be the art world that is eating you. But we're always trying to, we have people who interpret dreams and we try to understand them, what it means, you know. And I think that's really fascinating because with memory, for example, I have been away from home for so long that I've forgotten a lot of things. But I'm always very surprised the things that I remember. Like I remember very vividly that once my father went away, he was late from a trip and we thought he had died in an accident or something, and I was very young. I hid in a closet and I was wearing a necklace and I was praying and praying, and the minute I heard that he has arrived, I pulled the necklace as if a relief and release, and I came out of the, I think that's absurd. It feels like a dream, but it was reality and I never told anyone about that. But also sometimes when I'm alone, I think I'm mad. I think the question of madness, magic realism, dreams
are very close.
and memories. And I often tell Shoja, I honestly think sometimes I'm quite insane. But of course, when I get to people like you, I always try to be really smart about it. But I think every one of us do that. Just watch in a subway. I watch people. Everybody is really mad. I think we all are concealing our madness, which is so human. It is so human to be vulnerable and to be insane and suffer and not know what you're doing. Here we are walking around always acting that we are okay, which I think is okay. We're doing that because we don't want to expose. But the reality is, I think memories, dreams, they are just a reflection of everything that we're running away from. And the minute we put our head on that pillow, especially when we're upset about something, we're worried about something, they visit us and then we try to escape it. And I think in my film work, I try to just go right after them.
Yes. Raymond?
I wanted to ask you if you've read the Dream Book of Ibn Arabi, and if there's the tradition of dreams in Persian literature. How do you relate to that in your work?
Actually, I haven't read. One of the books that I've read that has been a very big influence on me has been Palace of Dreams by Ishmael Kadir. It's if people haven't read it, you must read it. It's a fantastic magic realism novel, and Ishmael Kadir, of course, is a master of magic realism. But it's about I think it takes place another century, but it's about the state and the fanaticism of this authoritarian government that has an institution that daily collects people's dreams and has different departments, very Kafkaesque, and reception, analysis, and interpretation, and different rooms where different uniforms are worn, and it's highly secret because basically the head of the states believed that God projects the future in people's dreams, and catastrophes and tyranny and all of that is projected in people's dreams. So they have people on daily basis coming and books and reading and studying and analyzing. I just found it fascinating. The problem with that book, and I optioned it for a film, but it's just there's not a single woman in that film. But so I think in Persian literature, I'm not the one to I'm not able to, maybe other people would know, but my attraction has been more Western films and actually Ismail Kadir.
Can you share with us what that book's about a little bit more so everyone have a sense of it, Raymond?
Well, it's about occult and prophecy and how dreams are a shared territory where we're all go to this place, and it's not, dreams are not personal to us alone. They're we're sharing them together, and we're sharing them with people in the past. And I guess the other thing I want to ask you is, are you familiar with this videotape interview with Osama bin Laden, where he's talking about his plan for 9/11 and how so many people were coming to him, his cohorts, telling him about this dream that they had of planes flying into the building, that he had to tell people to stop talking about these dreams because he was afraid that his plan would come out in public, because that's something that's straight out of the Ibn Arabi.
Oh my God, that's, I mean, one thing that I think is very interesting about dreams, that you forget them immediately after your dream. And then one of the things Jean-Claude always talks about is they're no longer dreams, they become a story when you try to write them, you know, because they lose their thing. And I think it's fascinating because we take something and then we turn it into a story, but in reality, you know, dreams are very fleeting.
And dreams also can be very near prophecy in some way. I think that just that you just now mentioned September 11, David Levi Strauss, one of our friend and editor-at-large in the Rail, wrote the brilliant essay on Joseph Boy in September 11, where he described Boy's first visit New York. I think it's probably 1974, just right after the Twin Towers were just built. And we all remember the performance where he arrived at the airport. JFK undertook this healing ritual carried by an ambulance directly to Rene Bloch, where he spent a week with the Coyote. But I remember in the article, Levi described how he came away and reproduced the multiples of the Twin Tower from a bird's eye view, which is very hard architectural, concrete substance, and then he glazed over it with almost like a substance of butter melting, so it had this yellow tint to it. And then he inscribed on the left and the right two saints, Cosmas and Damien, Arabian saint, who are known to be saint of healing power. That's what they did. They were healing saints. So it's a prophecy of what need to be destroyed in order to be healed. But I think that's another different subject again. Let's not go off here. Can we take another question? Yes.
I guess in my experience from like a Western view.
Can you speak higher?
Oh yeah. I guess in my experience from a Western view, you know, Iran seems so much of a patriarchy, but in reality, there's such a strong matriarchy, like that lives below the surface and in their home. I was just wondering if you feel like that contributed to your work, or like if it lies underneath in the way that you think at all. If you agree, I guess.
Good question.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the question a little bit better. I think there's no doubt that my biggest idols and inspirations have been women, and I hope I understood your question. And the women poets and people in Iran who happen to be great artists, but also suffered a lot, and because of the male-dominated society, including Shahnoush Parstoupou, Forough Farrokhzad, and I always felt that the struggle of women in the culture that I came from made the woman extremely strong and rebellious and radical, and therefore I'm obsessed with important artists, not just because their work, but because their lives that they have lived in a very patriarchal society. And I think that although I lived most of my life now outside of my own country, I have this sense of rebellion, and I am not a feminist, but I feel like my core expression is from a female perspective, and always fighting off the male I don't know, did I answer you properly? And even Kulthum, I mean, it was another. So, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I definitely, there's an evidence of issue of femininity in relation to Islamic fundamentalism and militancy, for that matter, for sure. Absolutely.
And I'm sorry to interrupt.
But the misread also, Shirin, the fact that these are women who've been portrayed throughout the film, they are very strong women, resilient, have a certain inner power also that can be misread from afar. I mean, that's why you get attacked from both sides, am I right? Yeah. Both this, Iranian and American, sometimes.
I mean, it's interesting, the people who I've been very interested in, like Shahrnush Parsipur or Furugh, are the people who also, although their work is really grounded in the culture of Iran and the society they lived and the struggles they had, their work is absolutely universal. It's not really about Iran. And that's perhaps why I identify with their work, because I'm Iranian, but I'm really a New Yorker. I'm not really Iranian. I've lived most of my life here. And so I have no claim in Iran, and I'll be really faking it if I try to act like one of the women in Iran who lives in Iran and works in Iran. But what I like, the vision of the artists that I've been inspired about, is the universality, the vastness of their vision, that it refuses to be pigeonholed to one culture. But one was in prison, one died when she was only 31, and it's tragic. They have had very tragic lives. But at the same time, I want to say that, to the credit of Iranian women at large, look at the Iranian culture today. They are the most rebellious women you see anywhere in the world. The Iranian women are amazing and have always fought the authority, and so that is also part of our culture. But I think that I'm really Eastern Western type of artist, and I tend to identify with those Iranian artists, writers, filmmakers whose work transcends the specificities of the Iranian culture.
Yeah, that's a very perpetual condition of being displaced. I feel that deeply too. I have yet figured out what the hell I'm doing yet, but at least the rail is still free, it's out there. Another question, yes.
I hope this isn't too far afield. Also should say, I'm born here and I feel displaced. But I know you, Shirin, from a practice, another cultural practice, folkloric dance, that's rich, that's deep, that's West African in its variety. And I wonder how that's informed your work, or at least your process.
I have a confession. Malika and Mandana and I, we have been dancing African dance for how long? We don't even want to count, so I have an obsession ever since I was 17. I started with Katak dance and then African. But for me, choreography is something I use a lot in my work. If anyone pays attention, there's a great use of choreography. Rapture was one of the most important ones, where there was not a single moment we went to one person's face. It was always a group versus a group of men versus group of men and women. I think the body postures, I mean, if you look at my photographs here, I think the human body and the mobility and the gracefulness, but the way that we hold back pain and anxiety, and yet I think the body is an incredible tool. For me, it's been both handicapping, because I am always so concerned about weight and all these ridiculous things, and yet I'm also really taking care of it in a way. I think dance ritual, because we do something that is traditional, is ritualistic. The music, the percussion, the amazing dance that we know, it comes from ancient times.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's something about it that is animalistic. It makes me feel good that I don't just make a movie about it, but I can use my own body. That I don't photograph and I don't anymore use, but my body could be a way for me to extend my art. It's a language of art, but I don't do it publicly, obviously. Please. It's just a personal thing. It's not for vanity. It's not to a public exposure. But it gives me pleasure, the fact that I can use my hands in a way that it's really artistic. The same way I do my makeup. So it's about your body being your possession and how it could be an extension of your artistic vocabulary. I think.
Make you look good,
I never
Shirin.
talked about it, actually.
It make you look good.
Huh?
It make you look good. Those
I
dancing.
don't know about that, but
Hello.
it's for personal.
But that's an
satisfaction.
interesting question. I shared with you this nice story. You remember the Live Aid concert in Philadelphia at JFK Stadium, where it revived, brought back all these old bands like Led Zeppelin came back together. There was this performance, I think, between George Thorogood and Bo Diddley. I was mesmerized by the whole entire concert. And the following day, there was a little reception in some ballroom, and I got to meet Bo Diddley. And I was a little stoned, so I was very courageous. I came right up to him. I said, "Mr. Bo Diddley, how did you get your name, sir? It's so unique." He said, "It came from the diddley bow." The diddley bow is one of the oldest African instrument in West Africa. It's so intense. So it was an instrument that was very popularized, given to children, slaves children, to play with. And what happened, as we know, some of us love music, particularly Delta blues music. That's when the music originated from the diddley bow. So during the north migration between 1917 and several following decades, most people migrated to Chicago, whereupon Chicago blues were created. And then among people like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and many others, was being recorded and disseminated through many famous record label, Columbia Record and whatnot. And then it got sent out to West Africa. So those musicians there, like Ali Touré, and many others, listened to the music and realized it's echo their own historical past of that Pacific sound. So they took back. I call that the boomerang effect. You throw it, it swing around, it's going to come back to you. So I think that's definitely more amplified when you dislocate it, when you're taken from your own birthplace. Right now I'm reading more Vietnamese poetry for that reason. The same thing that, you might feel the same way. It's generational of historical past, and that's the memory to which we only explicate when we need to. We tend to ignore them, actually. But when we need to, it's there for us, One more question before the book signing begin. Yes.
Oh, yes. Shirin, I was talking to you in the bathroom, and I want you to kind of connect all these women's stories and dreams. And you were in Oaxaca with Frida Kahlo. How do you connect your story with Mexico a little bit?
Oh, we made a video called Tuba, another very dreamy project where we literally went and found a tree in the middle of nowhere in Oaxaca. And we had a Mexican woman. We carved out the figure, and she was inside the myth of Tuba comes from the Quran. So it was another allegorical video project. And I fell in love with Mexico. And talking about Frida Kahlo, when I was a student, she was my hero as an art student. And I was obsessed with her story, her looks, and her sickness, and her relationship with Diego, and her relationship to political revolutions and politics and communism. And I was really fascinated by her. And I think subconsciously, I think the way that her look and the way she dressed and she made herself up became her identity and extension of her art in some strange way. I don't think I'm trying to follow her, but I think it really did had an impact on me in a way that we artists always separate who we are from our work, and that somehow I feel like she was a big influence in me letting myself having my own signature as an artist, how I look and what I do with myself. So she was my idol. I want to say one thing. I have to say the person who pioneered this project, Eleanor Foster, the founding person of the Ivorypress in Madrid, has been very generous to me, and she's not here obviously, but I'm really grateful that somebody took this project underway and made this happen. That's Eleanor and Ivorypress, and thank you everyone at the Printed Matter for distributing it.
And thank you for all of you being here. Let's get the books. Thank you.